All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for prioritizing time for learning and connecting with one another. My name is Susan Lightfoot Schempf. I'm the Executive Director of the Food Systems Leadership Network. I am calling in from New Orleans, Louisiana today, and I am so delighted to be here in partnership with the Common Market and Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Funders to host and to co-host this national webinar featuring the Georgia ACRE Collective. So we'll be talking about making values-based procurement work, lessons from the Georgia ACRE Collective. Want to give a shout out to Caitlin and Emily from the Common Market, Justin from the Conservation Fund, Diana from Plain Stated LLC, and Murray from Day Springs Farms. Also, Noah from the Rockefeller Foundation is with us today. So those are some of our speakers that you'll be hearing from shortly. And then also want to give a shout out to Melanie Edwards, who's here as a longtime partner and friend of the Food Systems Leadership Network, providing some Zoom backup, and also to Maggie from the Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Funders for everyone's roles in helping to make this webinar happen today. So we can go to the next slide. Again, if you're just arriving into the room, would love for y'all to introduce yourselves in the chat. So your name, organization, or business, or whatever, kind of entity, if you are connected to one that you're working with, where you're calling in from, and share a value that you prioritize more than dollars and cents. We'll drop that prompt in the chat again as we move on into the next slide. Just going to give a couple of quick Zoom reminders. This is a Zoom meeting and not a webinar. So we have like less controls over the many people that are coming in the room today. So just a reminder to please stay on mute as we're going. But we'd also really love to see your faces. So if you're able to share your video, please turn it on so folks can see one another. But if you're not in a place to be able to do that, we totally understand. Really encourage y'all to use the chat. It's a great way to connect with each other, to share resources. So love that y'all are warming it up already. Thank you for that. We are recording this session. So if you have colleagues that might want to watch this later, if you want to revisit anything, and for the folks that weren't able to be here today, we'll be sharing the recording after the call. And then we'll also have some time for discussion and Q&A towards the end of the call. So that'll be coming here shortly. All right. So for anyone who's new to the Food Systems Leadership Network, I just want to give a quick overview of who we are. So the FSLN is a national peer learning community that connects food systems leaders, strengthens individual and collective leadership capacity, and fosters collaboration across communities. All of that to accelerate the realization of a just food system that generates good food, health, and opportunity for all. And we are all about connecting people, learning together, and driving that learning into making systems change in the food system. So a couple of months back, when the Common Market team had shared their Georgia Acre Collective case study, I reached out to Hailey Johnston at Common Market. I said, "Hey, Hailey, do y'all have any plans for sharing this out to the broader community? I think a lot of people would be really interested in learning about this and connecting with you about it." And so he said, "Yeah, let's rally a team and let's make this happen." And as we discussed it, we said, let's bring in Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Funders, another network that could reach a broad community and bring together a really dynamic group of learners together here in this webinar today. So just really appreciate everybody for bringing your networks into the mix and for us being able to co-host this space together. I'm just going to quickly give some goals for this webinar before I get us going with the speakers. So, just want to name what we're hoping this conversation will make possible today. And first, it's that we're hoping that you'll walk away with practical, transferable lessons that you can apply in your own community, especially around advancing values-based institutional procurement. Second, we want to illuminate what it actually takes to build a local food ecosystem, the collaboration, coordination, alignment, and shared commitments required to move food from farm to plate. Third, we hope this conversation demonstrates the real power of partnership and collaboration, that none of us can do this alone, and that durable change happens when our complementary expertise comes together. And finally, we want to keep this grounded in the farmer experience, in what targeted investment and collaboration can mean for small scale farms on the ground. So again, thanks to the Sustainable Ag and Food Systems Funders and the Common Market for partnership in hosting this webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Emily Hennessy, who's going to give us an overview on the Georgia ACRE Collective.
Thank you so much, Susan, to your team and to also the folks at SAFSS, SAFSF, for collaborating with us on this webinar. My name is Emily Hennessy, and for the last 3 years, I've served as the program manager for the Georgia ACRE Collective based in Atlanta, Georgia. And this collective was led by Common Market. The creation was led by the Common Market after a year-long planning process. So the collective officially launched in late 2022, and we are a coalition of local and national organizations that are working to advance agriculture, community resilience, and equity. So ACRE, specifically through values-based food procurement. And we are a cross-sector partnership that, in addition to the Common Market, includes the Conservation Fund, Georgia Organics, Healthcare Without Harm, the Turner Clinic at Emory University's Law School, and then the Alliance for a Healthier Generation conducted a third-party evaluation over the course of the 3-year project. And this work was supported with seed funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, who you'll have an opportunity to hear from soon. And what brought this work together is that members of the ACRE Collective share this vision of creating a vibrant, equitable food system that can benefit both urban and rural communities, with a specific emphasis on values-based procurement to achieve that vision. And as everyone on this call, I'm sure knows, food systems transformation work is inherently complex. And so we intentionally designed this work to be a collective and not a single organization initiative. Um, I think there's kind of different areas of focus that we could have chosen to help achieve this vision that we've outlined. But this group is squarely focused on values-based procurement with institutions. And why did we do that, you may ask? Well, similar to probably most of the states across the country, millions of Georgians rely on anchor institutions like hospitals and universities and K through 12 schools for their food. And at the same time, Georgia, their number one industry is agriculture. So we have a large number of large scale producers that export their products around the country and around the world. And we also have a pretty vibrant network of smaller farms that are focused more on direct to consumer relationships like farmers markets and CSAs. But many of the small and mid-sized producers in Georgia have historically been excluded from wholesale sales to anchor institutions. So the Acre Collective saw this as an opportunity to really connect those dots and leverage institutional food procurement to meet our shared vision. And so the work over the last 3 years has been focused on trying to make this vision a reality. And how we did this was focusing on, to start, or one of our focus areas was organizing demand. So specifically focusing on developing market opportunities for these values aligned producers in the region through anchor institutions in Metro Atlanta. And then also building the supplier capacity to meet that demand with the recognition that there's a real need for coordinated and comprehensive support that creates the conditions for producers to be able to meet that demand and really thrive and be viable producers for the long term. And some key components of that support are, affordable access to land, capital, and then consistent markets. And I think one of the things that's really unique about Acre is that we were really intentional about not assuming that either the supply or the demand are a given. and that work needs to be done simultaneously to really support both sides of this equation. Next slide, please. So, how did we do this work? I'm going to highlight some aspects of the Acre Collective's work. It's definitely not exhaustive. But one of the focus areas was our forward commitment program. And for us, forward commitments are a pledge made by an institution to purchase products from a producer over a growing season. And these agreements allow the producer to plan around the institution's needs at the beginning of their season, which helps mitigate risks that are typically associated with selling wholesale, by creating a more stable and supportive environment for farmers. And this program has grown exponentially over the last 3 years. So, in early 2022, there were 8 institutions making forward commitments. And by the end of 2025, there were 54 institutions throughout the Southeast that made forward commitments. Another aspect of this work was the legal toolkit that was developed by the Turner Environmental Law Clinic at Emory University. And the goal of this toolkit is to provide really practical tools to help guide institutions through a set of legal and communication and management considerations, that they can adapt to their own specific institutional circumstances. So things like sample contracts with food service management companies or RFPs when institutions are in the process of changing to a new food service management company or that contract is about to expire. So the toolkit's been completed. Right now, it's in the process of being turned into an easy to navigate website. So be on the lookout for this soon. Another area of work under the organized demand category was our buyer producer meetings. And I love seeing in the comments in the chat all of the emphasis on relationships because that was the whole focus of these buyer producer meetings. So, to facilitate like deeper connections between institutional food buyers and local producers, we held a series of in-person buyer producer meetings. And these meetings weren't focused solely on just procurement logistics, but they were really focused on the why behind values-based purchasing. And since these meetings began in 2022, participation has grown to include some major food service management companies like Morrison's Healthcare, Aramark, Sodexo, Bon Appetit, and Sage Dining Services, alongside a diverse set of farmers and producers. And in particular, these meetings were really crucial for powering the forward commitment program. So they helped these buyers and producers move beyond just transactional relationships into real partnerships that we saw result in really tangible purchasing commitments for the upcoming season. And next, I'll mention the Farmer Champion program. So we all know that positive behavior or positive reinforcement encourages behavior change. I feel like I use this on a daily basis with my young children, and it works for young kids and it also works for institutions. So the goal of the Farmer Champion program was to help drive procurement behavior change. And this Farmer Champion Awards program initiated out of Georgia Organics, which had been using this program to recognize and celebrate restaurants and other local food businesses. And through the ACRE Collective, we expanded this program to institutions. So in 2024, we piloted it, an expansion to higher education. And this is an image of our awards ceremony last spring with our Commissioner of Agriculture and representatives from Mercer University, who were one of our recipients of the inaugural Institutional Farmer Champion Award program. And then this summer, we expanded it to also include higher hospitals, K through 12, and corporate dining, in addition to higher education. And so far, over 30 institutions throughout the Southeast have signed up to participate in this program. And we plan to have award ceremonies for this summer. So, next slide, please. The last bucket of work under the organized demand category I'll mention is our local foods incentive school pilot program with 3 Metro Atlanta school districts. So This program provided both financial support and also technical assistance to these three school districts to increase the quantity and diversity of local products served in school meals. The districts that participated in this pilot received support with local product identification and sourcing, recipe development, menu integration. We supported with student taste tests like the one that you see here, as well as staff training and marketing support. And over the 3 years of the program, over $180,000 in local food was served in these three school districts via this pilot program. Um, and we recently received some funding to explore state policy changes to make opportunities like this available to school districts statewide. So next slide, please. Moving on to the support supply umbrella of the work. The ACRE Collective recognizes that in order to be successful, all farmers need access to three key things, access to land, markets, and capital. The Conservation Fund, who you'll hear from briefly or later in this webinar, was the key piece for the land access component of the ACRE Collective through the Farms Fund program, which acquires farmland near metropolitan areas and transitions it to next generation farmers through long-term leases and agricultural conservation easements. So I'll let Justin share more about this work momentarily. Moving on, the infrastructure grant program was created by the Acre Collective specifically to facilitate infrastructure improvements on farms to support wholesale production. Um, there was a huge demand for this grant program. 36 growers applied for over $500,000 in funding via this program. And we had about $115,000 that we were able to award to 10 different growers. And you'll also get to hear from Murray from Day Springs Farms and also from Diana, who supported with technical assistance for these grantees on this webinar to learn more about this program. And the last piece I'll mention under support supply is the Farmer Loan Fund. And this is a program of the common markets that's focused on increasing access to capital. This program offers zero interest financing to cover pre-season costs for growers, so things like seeds and equipment. And repayment of these loans is structured through product deliveries. Next slide. I also want to highlight that kind of telling the story of this work was a significant component of the Acre Collective. And so we'll share some more details at the end of the webinar about where to find these resources. But we embedded communications and storytelling throughout this work and created a series of case studies and also a series of videos and blog posts where we highlighted lessons learned and best practices that we gathered over the last 3 years. Next slide. Um, we also work to create opportunities for shared learning across geographies with other Rockefeller grantees throughout our grant period. This is one example of a convening that we had in Georgia at Love is Love Farm with other Rockefeller grantees from Chicago and New Mexico. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to walk through this bullet, but I just wanted to share kind of a highlight of some of the impacts that we've had over the last 3 years. And although the initial seed funding from Rockefeller concluded at the end of last year, we're really excited to see many aspects of this work continue past this initial grant period. And again, going back to this point of relationships, I think the foundational work that has been done over the last 3 years to support partnerships and relationships across these organizations has really set the stage for continued partnerships and collaboration for many years to come. And I'm excited for all of you to have the opportunity to hear directly from others involved in the ACRE Collective during today's webinar. So I will pass it off to Noah Cohen-Klein to share a few remarks about the ACRE Collective from the Rockefeller Foundation's perspective.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Don't know where you got that photo of me, but my beard was browner back then. I like it. Thank you. Great to see everybody. Thank you for including me in the conversation. I'm going to be brief, but since we do have a number of funders on the call, I wanted to share a quick funder perspective on why the Rockefeller Foundation chose to make a significant and multi-year investment in this work in Atlanta in its food shed. Um, when we started this work in Atlanta, the Rockefeller Foundation had for some years been funding a strategic approach to food systems change that many of us know as good food purchasing or good food procurement in the US, and we'd also been funding similar work globally. That's work that's anchored in this basic idea that large nutrition programs like school food can also be a market driver for more equitable, more sustainable, more nourishing food systems. And our investments in good food purchasing began in 2019, largely with support to the institutions themselves or others that were supporting the institutions to, help them do that kind of challenging work that often very kind of technical and legal work of changing the way that they purchase their food for their food service. Um, and we quickly learned, as many have, that work at the institutional level alone wasn't going to be sufficient. There was also a need for enabling policies at all levels of government, for coalitions to advocate and support and hold accountable those policies, for more regional value chain coordination and value chain infrastructure, and of course, support for farmers to participate, and especially small and mid-sized farmers to participate in those larger institutional markets. And so we began layering in investments in kind of all these different areas of the system into that national funding strategy. But one of the things that we really struggled with at the time, and again, sharing kind of a funder perspective here, is that in a kind of systems strategy at a national scale, there's often a long timeline to impact. And when I say impact, I mean meaningful, observable impact at the farm level, at the farmer and food worker level, in terms of revenue to farmers, worker conditions, farm management practices, and it can be difficult to draw that clear and attributable line from those systems investments to the real impact on the ground that we want to see. And just as an aside, I think that's probably one of the big challenges for good food purchasing is that those of us who work in that space know that it is a powerful and dynamic strategy, and it's been moving in the right direction and it has multi-layered kind of systems effects. But it can be difficult to point to exactly where the impact is happening. And sometimes we need to be able to point to impact in order to convince policymakers and other funders and schools and others who need to be brought along. So we began considering whether we could continue investing in kind of all or most of those pieces of the good food purchasing puzzle simultaneously, but in geographically bounded areas, in specific food sheds or kind of municipalities and their food shed where progress could potentially happen more quickly with that kind of focused investment, and where good food demand and supply could be coordinated together, and where from that we could, draw more demonstration effects and deeper learning about how these models were working in practice. So we offered support for a few place-based investments. Emily also mentioned Chicago and New Mexico, and one of which was Atlanta. And Atlanta was particularly notable for the presence of the common market and that kind of sophisticated operational infrastructure, trucks, warehouses, for aggregating and distributing food at the appropriate scale in relationship and grounded in the values of equity and sustainability and opportunity. Fast forward 3 years, as Emily mentioned, our grant has reached its conclusion, and today I'm excited to hear about some of those demonstration effects and some of those learnings from this panel. The last thing that I will just say is that in entering into this work and in starting by supporting the kind of planning that Emily mentioned, it was really important to us that this be a coordinated approach across kind of several actors in the food system. And so, setting aside all that strategic rationale that I just laid out, I think we also just knew that if we could help deepen coordination and collaboration in the local food system, that good things would happen. We all know that food systems organizations are doing amazing work. They're very often under-resourced. Many of them, most of them, are doing their best to work in collaboration with their peers. But collaboration takes real resources. It requires a lot of time and effort. And we felt confident that if nothing else, the project management support we were providing for this collective action in Georgia would have good outcomes, even if we couldn't predict exactly what those would be. And I continue to believe that it's deeply important for funders to simply make resources available for that kind of regional food systems coordination. So with that, Emily, I will hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Noah, and for being here and for your continued support. It's been really wonderful to partner with you and others at the Rockefeller Foundation throughout this grant period. Next slide, please. We are just going to briefly introduce the funders, or not the funders, the panelists on this. If you want to go, yeah, back one. Perfect. So you already heard from me, so I'm not going to share a lot more, but just to clarify, I was kind of the main convener and project manager for the ACRE Collective. So a lot of scheduling of meetings, keeping all the pieces moving forward, coordinating and keeping the Rockefeller Foundation up to date with what was going on here, and then spend a big chunk of my time overseeing and implementing the local foods incentive pilot program. So here is a picture of me where I'm clearly very enthusiastically serving some sweet potatoes that were served throughout one of our partner school districts, Rockdale County Public Schools, as part of the local foods incentive pilot program. I am now going to go kind of one by one through the panelists for our Q&A today, and would love to hear from each of y'all if you can share kind of a brief intro about who you are, who you work for, what your role was in the project and the impact that the ACRE Collective had in your work, and if there's anything that you want to that touch on in terms of like the unique challenge that you were facing that you didn't feel like you could overcome alone. So I will first pass it off to Justin, and we'll have about 5 minutes per panelist.
Okay, greetings everyone. Confirming you all can hear me. Great.
You're great.
All right. Yes, so thank you all for sharing space. My name is again Justin Nicholson, and I am here representing the Conservation Fund, serving as the program manager for the Georgia Farms Fund program. And I'll reference our work in light of the unique challenge that we are aiming to assist in resolving, which is the land loss, or farmland loss in our nation. U.S. loses on average about 1.8 million acres of farmland annually. And here in Georgia, that number is around 60,000 acres annually. So therein lies the opportunity that the Conservation Fund Farms Fund aims to support with our farmland access conservation program. So the Farms Fund is uniquely positioned to acquire at-risk agricultural lands under threat of development pressure by acquiring those farmlands and simultaneously creating relationships with next generation agricultural producers who are in a position where they are experienced, given 2 to 3 years of farm management experience, and are ready to scale their agricultural production up to increased production level, most often to leverage wholesale distribution and institutional purchasers. So during our period of transition where we are acquiring property, we're supporting the farm businesses in increasing their viability through technical assistance support, as well as property management for the farmland asset. We're giving the farm businesses a patient pathway for land ownership, stepping in, acquiring that farmland on the front end, and creating a lease contract with the singular option to purchase that farm for that farm business. So at the same time, we're working with partner land trust organizations to encumber those agricultural lands with agricultural easements, effectively conserving those farmlands in perpetuity. And then we're able to sell that reduced agricultural land value to that farmer at the end of their lease contract, which now gives them that pathway for reduced agricultural land ownership, and again, effectively conserving that property in perpetuity. So that earned us a seat at the ACRE Collective table, where we are effectively addressing that very critical land access need in the local food ecosystem. And we couldn't, in any local food ecosystem, that's just one piece. Of course, you need, as mentioned, the market partners as well as infrastructure to support those farm businesses. So with that, I'm complete. I think I kept it to
Thank
5 minutes.
you, Justin. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, it's been wonderful to have the Farms Fund be part of this collective, and I think this model is just such a unique and very tangible way to provide land access to growers. I will pass it off now to Diana Sutherland, who is next up. And if you can move the slide forward, please. Thank you.
Are we here? Are we good?
You're great.
Right, perfect. Oh, that's right. There we go. I'm Diana. I'm the one in the middle when you look at the picture because I'm with Plain Stated. We are an ag consultant group. We do consulting. I just love agriculture. So anything we can do to move that forward, and we work really closely with the Georgia Department of Agriculture, with Georgia Grown, and the Georgia Grown Resource Centers. And so I put this picture in here because it's all of us, right? So when you're looking at that, you're looking at Heidi Jeffers, who is the program director for the resource centers, and then Glenn Volpe with LVS. What we did was we managed the technical assistance side of things. And I had that little quote up there that says, when you catch the car, then what? Because a lot of times when people receive money or receive grants, maybe they don't know exactly what to do to implement that to make it the biggest success they could. So, as a team, our role here was to see who got the grants, see what their needs were, intake that, come up with a plan that assessed it. Like we wanted to get their perspective from each of the farms, assess that, see if they wanted the additional technical assistance to move them forward. And then we found a way to track it and to come back. And so we also, aside from the three of us, if there was something that they needed that could help move their business forward, then we also brought in other subject matter experts. So if we needed to send somebody to Georgia Tech Manufacturing Extension Program to ask a question, we did it. If we needed to send them somewhere else, we did, because one of the things that everyone has already talked about is we're all so much better together, and there's no reason to hold someone so tightly that we can't let them grow. So Glenn gets a big shout out because although my role was to coordinate and to bring in everyone like note wise and need wise and help examine that, Glenn was the boots on the ground. So I had to do his little picture out there on the farm because he's the one who went to the farms, made sure that a lot of times when you read something on paper, it's vastly different from what you're going to see when you put yourself on the farm with someone. So it was quite a pleasure to work directly with everyone, and we would love to do more. I mean, we would just keep on doing it if we could, right? That's part of what our role is. One of the things we also say sometimes is people will also take your money if you'll let them. So it's very good to be wise about how you enter in any of your relationships. So I think I really don't have much more to say. You've got the notes on the parts that we played. I just want to continue to say that what we love to do is make sure we're equipping people to be the best that they can be. And as a consultant, you don't have to listen to what we say, but we've all had some experience on the ground that I think brings something to the table. So I'm done, if that's okay.
Thank you, Diana. Appreciate you being here, and you are absolutely a connector. It was wonderful to collaborate with Diana and her team with the Georgia Grown Resource Center because They are, yeah, they have a lot of resources kind of at their fingertips, and I think a key part of their work was to support the grantees in this infrastructure program to make sure that the grantees had access to as many resources in addition to the financial resources as possible to help make their projects a success. So now I will pass it last but not least to Marie Brett, who is one of our farmer infrastructure grantees. Take it away, Marie.
Hello, how are y'all? Good to be here. I'm Murray Brett, and my wife and I are owners of Dayspring Farms and near Danielsville, Georgia. We're about 15, maybe 20 miles north of Athens. We started in 2011 doing mixed produce and developed a business plan that we moved away from pretty quickly. And now we find ourselves growing organic grain. We have seed cleaning equipment, milling equipment, and we produce flour, all grades flour, and all grades milling, mill corn products, and sell to restaurants and bakeries, primarily in Atlanta. It took us about 5 years to be profitable. Um, we were upside down for the first 6 years, and it took a lot longer, a lot more effort, and a lot more capital than we had ever imagined to get a business, family farm business started. We originally started with our oldest son. He provided a lot of the sweat equity, and I provided some financing and a little bit of know-how. We bought used equipment, and I rebuilt the equipment and got it going, put it all together, and the different to make it functional. We just for instance, we bought an old 7720 for $6,500 and put a lot of sweat equity and rebuilt it, and some old tractors. And I guess the 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 sweetest deal we found was a 30-inch Meadows mill in an auction over in Alabama that we purchased for $600. It was in two crates. We bought it back, and I spent about 2 weeks rebuilding it. And when my daughter saw it running, she said, "Daddy, you got mad skills. You got mad skills." And I just want to say to you that having mad skills as a farmer, or even having an agribusiness skills, there's not enough mad skills to make it work. And I've and getting to know the folks at the common market and being associated with now this ACRE Collective grant, we've met other people with madder skills than Murray Brett has. And Diana was a big help to us. She came out to our farm. She understands agriculture. She understands farm processes. She understands business and what it takes to make a business work. And she knows a lot of people. I was amazed at all the contacts that she put us in touch with, and she enjoys helping people. And that was one of the greatest benefits of having Diana involved. Uh, we also had a couple of opportunities to be with Bill Green on different presentations to vendors. And Bill Green is also a man with mad skills. He is expert at doing presentations. He knows a lot more about marketing and making presentations to vendors and corporations than I would ever know. And just all our involvement together with the ACRE Collective has been wonderful. We've benefited greatly from it. The just I suppose the for you to know a little bit more about us, about 6 years into our business, we got a nice grant from USDA to put in some subsurface drip irrigation. That's really the transformation of our farm becoming profitable. And then when we got the ACRE Collective grant, it allowed us to buy some refrigeration uh, to refrigerate the area where we keep clean grain after we clean it with our cleaner, and that allowed us to expand our inventory, which allowed us to also expand our customer base. And we appreciate everything that ACRE Collective has done for us.
Thank you so much, Murray. And just kind of helping to connect the dots between some of the things that Murray just said and other aspects of the ACRE Collective. I think having this refrigerated storage space to extend the availability of your products has been really helpful for the Forward Commitment Program. I think a key piece of the Forward Commitment Program is to make sure that there are some year-round products available to institutions. Not just in kind of the peak fruit and vegetable growing season in Georgia. So yeah, just helping to connect some of those dots. And now I'll pass it back to Susan to moderate our panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily and Justin and Diana and Murray and Noah, for just giving us such a better sense of the collaboration and mad skills that were brought to this table to make this collective possible. We're going to spend some time now just having a panel discussion with these different speakers to dig in a little bit more to like what really made this possible. So I think, Caitlin, you could take the slides down here and feature our speakers. There we go. And so I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to have some time for full group discussion and Q&A. So those of you that are listening in right now, please, drop your questions in the chat. We'll get to those momentarily, and we'll have some discussion. So first question that I have for everybody here is in our panel, if you had to name the 2 or 3 conditions that made the Georgia ACRE Collective possible, so things that had to be in place before values-based procurement could move from aspiration to reality, what were they? And whoever's just like feeling the spirit, go ahead and jump on in. So a couple key ingredients.
I'll hop in there. And I guess I'll lead with my bias in the areas that are in our purview and say access to affordable land and prime soils just for, healthy food production is critical. And then in addition to that, I would say knowledgeable farmers who are able to produce that healthy food for the local food ecosystem are just critical and foundational in this work.
Here, I'll hop into, I think that you also just to have on that very opposite end is an awareness. There has to be an awareness of how local farmers and how land and all those things impact us on the end user side. So I think making sure we're bringing that to people's attention. No one's going to want to forward buy if they don't know why they should be doing it.
I'll note, I think one of the key pieces is having some champions and leaders in this space, especially thinking from the institutional perspective, to help like serve as being a peer and like a peer leader and show that this is possible, and to really help like move towards this world where values-based procurement is the norm, not the exception. We've particularly seen that true in the food service management companies world, where there's leadership at the regional level or even at the national level who, they're like sticking their necks out and saying this is something that we're going to commit to and we expect this to happen at the account level. And so, typically I'm not always pro like grass tops down. We need to make sure that, right, that there's like the grassroots support for this too. But I think having some real leadership and champions is key to make values-based procurement work.
And then, for me, I grew up on a conventional farm, and so learning organic farming was a learning curve. It was a pretty big learning curve to start with, and having resources to help in that. We had a lady who was involved in Sustainable Ag from UGA came out, and she introduced me to a fellow by the name of Jack Laser. He's a organic farmer up in New York. I read his book and had conversations with him. He was a great resource to help me move towards more value-added processes on our farm and move away from commodity prices. That was a huge learning curve of what was necessary to go to value-added processes. All of them that we did to produce a high-quality flour, as we have sought to. And so resources and organic farming for me has been big. And then learning from other people who've experienced what we were trying to do beforehand.
Yeah, thank y'all. Emily, you had said earlier in your earlier remarks just about like how extraordinarily complex food systems transformation is. And the things that y'all are naming are at such different dimensions of change. And yet it requires all of those conditions. And Noah mentioned this as well, just like to be able to actually move the needle on farm to institution and values-based procurement. So thanks for sharing those. I heard access to land is critical, the knowledge of farmers, and also the exchange of that knowledge, the peer learning aspect that Murray, you just really emphasized. Um, the understanding the why. Diana, thank you for really emphasizing that, and Noah really spoke to that as well. And y'all raised up earlier too, just the importance of those relationships, like that at the core of all of this is not just the relationships within this team, but across this entire network that made this possible. So, and a number of different champions that are also a part of this network that make it all move forward. So a lot of people power in the mix. Um, and, while we have all those assets, of course, there's all the challenges. So, every collaborative effort, we know there are moments in the timeline or in the process along the way where it really could have fallen apart. And we've probably all been a part of those kinds of collaborations or partnerships in the past. So I'm curious to hear from y'all maybe where some of the biggest friction points or near failures were in this project, in this program, and what helped you push through. So maybe Diana, can I start with you?
Sure, be glad to. I mean, I would say there weren't that many, but the ones that we had, really the biggest one was scheduling because it is kind of like herding cats. I don't know how to explain that any better. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of folks that have differing schedules. People need to be on the farm. Sometimes we went in the wrong direction. I mean, like there was a lot to map out and to coordinate in order to make that happen. And I have to give Glenn props on that. So I might have been doing the behind the scenes coordinating, but Glenn was getting there whenever it needed to happen because we really needed to be available for the time frames that the farmers were available. It couldn't be on our schedules.
That's right. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, this is a pretty loaded question because there are so many different challenges that could arise. But just in sticking with our ACRE Collective work, just identifying how to meet farmers where they were in their respective processes and production methods so that we could really assess how to appropriately support. That took some intentional initiative. At the onset of this opportunity, there was a lot of attention put on like technical assistance and providing, technical assistance to farmers to better prepare them for the institutional purchasing. But then you realize that, okay, well, you you can't really do the work without the infrastructure, certain equipment that is critical in really maximizing your scale. So, very, very gracious that Rockefeller Funding gave us some flexibility to pivot, from that technical assistance resource that we were initially providing to more infrastructure investments.
Yeah, thank you. And what I hear in both of your responses is really about like the farmer at the center of the strategy. And I'm curious, Marie, how was your experience at that? Like thinking about yourself within this ecosystem of all these different players. how did that land for you?
Well, to start with, the greatest tension for us to begin with is just as a small business, having enough funds to do another capital project like the refrigeration. Refrigeration for us is necessary to get organic grain down to around 55 degrees to eliminate insects. They go dormant at that temperature for us, and we store a lot of grain. And if it's not in, if you don't have it, I got to go get a power cord. I'm about to die. I didn't realize that. Uh, but uh, the the challenge of funding, and then we went out for once we learned that we needed to refrigerate both our milling and our storage area and get it down to 50 degrees. Then having the funds to be able to purchase the refrigeration. The first refrigeration we bought reasonably because it was used, and a $6,500 3 horsepower unit. And this unit we've put in our storage, our inventory, is a 5 horsepower unit, and the original quotes we got were $30,000, and we just couldn't make another loan for that kind of money. And then we found out about the ACRE Collective grant and applied for it, and we're aware that we would be receiving it. And then we got another quote, and it came in at 25,000. It was still beyond what we wanted, so we made a deal with the guy to buy new equipment, and we installed part of it, and then he just came and hooked it up. So having some a little bit of a willingness to do above and beyond on our parts as farmers, and we hung the unit and put it outside on a pad and all that, and he came and hooked it up for us. And so, money is really an issue for a small farm and a small farmer, and uh, we don't have all the capital even now to buy all the equipment that we need to run our farm. So we're still renting some things. So it's a big challenge for us. That's perhaps one of the biggest challenges besides the marketing aspect.
Right. Well,
Like,
while you
I'm,
go get your power cord,
yes,
I'll shift to a question that's maybe a little bit more on the coordination across these different partners. So, the project is about aligning partners across these different levers. So the technical assistance that, Diana, your team were providing, the infrastructure investments, the forward commitments, and all that complexity, Emily, that you named around the legal toolkit. And like that is like a whole other layer of coordination and sophistication and lining up buyers and capital. So practically speaking, and I think this is maybe a question for you, Emily, as the project manager, how did you coordinate across these different organizations without it becoming overly complex or slow? Addressing the challenge that Diana had named around just scheduling across all these different players must have been quite an undertaking. So, what was there a backbone function or a decision-making structure that enabled that? Like, just talk to us about what really made that collaboration infrastructure possible.
Yeah, so the comment, and this I think gets at one of the questions that came up in the chat. So the Common Market was the lead grantee to Rockefeller for this work, but we applied as a collective. So all of the other organizations that were listed on that first slide were a part of that initial grant and listed as subgrantees. And so I think kind of hopefully I'm not too biased, and Justin especially, you can chime in if you disagree, but like a key piece of this was having the support for staffing to have a project manager to lead this work. So I was the one doing some cat herding at times, but like helping to drive all of the work forward, and it was absolutely an evolving process. So when we first started, I mean, Justin, I guess it was even before you joined. You joined a few months in, but we were meeting monthly as a core team of this collective. A lot of the work early on was collaborating with Alliance for a Healthier Generation on what the evaluation was going to look like and setting the framework for that. Those monthly meetings started to feel a little burdensome, and so we switched to bi-monthly meetings throughout the remainder of the grant period. After the first year, we developed subcommittees that I led in partnership with different collective partners, kind of depending on which project we were focused on. And that subcommittee structure is really what like drove that work forward. So we had one, I think the infrastructure grant program was the one that was probably the most time consuming because we were creating this brand new program and we needed to have scoring criteria and, and select the grantees and handle the funds distribution and coordinate with Diana and her team. Um, and I led the development of annual work plans, which is with each of the sub-grantees. And I think it was really valuable to do that on an annual basis as opposed to like, let's map out from the beginning what the next 3 years are going to look like. Because to Justin's point earlier, like, I mean, the world's a very different place now than it
Mm.
was 3.5 years ago. And we made some shifts. And there were times that we came back to Rockefeller and said, hey, like we said we were going to do this. And it feels like based on input from the community that we're working with that we need to make these shifts. And so the sub-grantee partner work plans like shifted accordingly. And I'll also note that I think we had annual in-person convenings with the partners, and as well as with some of the other grantees that I referenced earlier. And I think those were extremely valuable. Even though most of us are based in Metro Atlanta, we don't all see each other on a regular basis in this like virtual world that we live in. And I found those annual in-person gatherings just like it fills your soul, right? To like be able to connect with folks one on one, we always included some sort of field trip or site visit as part of that to get to see and hear about our work in action and have an opportunity to kind of adjust and if needed and just connect with the entire Acre Collective was extremely valuable.
Well, it's no small feat to orchestrate such a complex collaboration. So I really want to give you a lot of props and everyone on the team for making this possible. And also just lifting up the Rockefeller Foundation for being flexible around the grant. Like that's not always an easy ask to go back to a funder and say, you know what, like I think we actually need to shift this resource to something else that our farmers are telling us is really necessary to be able to achieve the goals of this grant. And the fact that that was possible and that y'all had the relationship there to be able to bring that forward and come forward with a better plan says a lot. So, some of y'all have touched on this at a couple points, and I'm curious, just to talk a little bit about risk. So values-based procurement often really breaks down because the risk lands on the farmers or the intermediaries who are, hoping to get access to that market. And in this model, how did y'all think about risk, the financial, operational, and market risks? And how did you structure the partnerships to share it more fairly so that that didn't land solely on the farmer? And maybe what role did the forward commitments that, Emily, when you talked about, really focusing in on demand, what role did that play in changing the risk equation in this collective? So maybe we could start with Justin on that one.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about de-risking farm production, that's really, the name of the game for the Conservation Fund. We step in to de-risk the acquisition or access of farmland on the front end for farmers, just based off of our capacity as, a 40 plus year experienced nonprofit organization that serves as a conservation acquisition partner. We have a certain level of credibility in the conservation space. We've been able to leverage just as seed funding for our program, the Conservation Fund's revolving fund. But the goal is to have the capital that revolves through the Farms Fund as we buy and sell properties to come back in and purchase more farms. Additionally, we've received so much philanthropic support to continue our mission, and it really takes that diversified capital stack to acquire this land on the front end, which again, as I mentioned onset of our discussion, creates that patient pathway for farmers to not have to walk into a bank and request a multi-million-dollar loan to increase their agricultural production space. That is really foundational for, a lot of farmers scaling their production, and not to mention the various technical assistance and infrastructure that's needed. So, the fact that this coalition has come together and covered so many aspects within the local food ecosystem, just really, really reduces a lot of risk on that farm production. And very pleased to say that, our partnerships have we had these partnerships prior to the ACRE Collective, and just coming into this role in the ACRE Collective, it really strengthened the need and ability for us to work together more efficiently, and kind of proved that we're doing some great work. And I'll pass it on. I'm sure, Emily, you can speak to just kind of how the forward commitment works. But, just from my perspective, that's a game changer for farmers, being able to have a guaranteed contract committed at the beginning of their season, so they can order their plants and really just plan ahead for a particular crop, guaranteed to a distribution outlet, receive that funding up front, and then that allows them to cash flow more effectively.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And I'll address the forward commitments, but also wanted to just mention risk around the infrastructure grant program. So we wrote checks to all of the infrastructure grantees after they were like notified that they had received a grant. So it wasn't a reimbursement based program, and this was at the same time that a lot of farmers were out, tens of thousands of dollars waiting for things like their equip reimbursements. And so I think, like, again, going back to like relationships and trust, that like this is a level of trust that we were putting on these grantees, and that we had created with these grantees, and that it wasn't a reimbursement based program. That was some risk that the common market took on, but that we were like willing to take on, because we thought that that was a really important part of this program, and made this access to capital more accessible to a lot of growers. And in terms of the forward commitment program, it absolutely helps reduce risk for farmers. I will note that, this has only been going on with the common market for the last 3 years, so it's a fairly new program. It's evolving over time. At this point, it's not a contractual agreement, so it's a agreement that we have with these institutions, but the institutions aren't signing contracts right now. And we'll see if the program transitions to that at some point. Again, I think it goes to like has a level of trust, and have these like strong relationships been developed to make the institutions be willing to sign contracts. But without contracts, we haven't seen issues with institutions like backing away from their commitments in any sort of significant way. That's not to say that kind of the end goal will be moving towards kind of these formalized contracts. But I think it's a really important like step in that direction, where the common market can take on some of that risk on behalf of the growers in our network.
Yeah, well, thank you for the just transparency around how that works. And, it's reminding me of something that somebody mentioned to me the other day about how we transact in trust in this food systems movement, and to make local and regional food systems thrive, that it is a trust-based economy. And so these trust-based agreements are one reflection of that. And there's also a spectrum of the kinds of contracts and agreements that we can have in place. But I really appreciate, you emphasizing the willingness of common market to take on that risk because of the trust that you have in your, farmer network to be able to make that happen. Just a couple more questions, and then we're going to move into some of the questions in the chat. Maybe just really briefly, Diana and Justin, would love to hear this for you. from you. For communities that are looking to, replicate or adapt this model, I already saw some, mentions in the chat around this. Um, what is like, the right order of operations? Do you start with the buyers, the farmers, the technical assistants, the infrastructure, policy, or what else? Like, what is one investment that you think mattered more than people realize? Maybe Diana, can we hear from you first?
Sure, I'll go first. And I'm going to piggyback on risk just for a minute. I know we're going fast, but I want to say that when I see risk, I know y'all are talking about something very specific in what we were doing, but the biggest gamblers there are the ones like Murray that I'm looking at, right? And I just can't say enough about how I respect the farmers because they step out every day and do what we need, right? The land,
Mm.
the food, what they provide for us, and they're the biggest gamblers I've ever seen. So I just want to give a big shout out to that. It kind of touches my heart, and I wanted to say it. But the other thing that I would say is it's almost like which one is first? It's all of them, right? Like I don't really know how you do it without being able to pull from all of them. So I'm not going to give you a good answer, except for that when I look back at Emily and I see that word that we said, which was champion, somebody had to pull it together in order to figure out where we needed to go and pull in the excitement around what we were going to do. So I think we need a champion first and foremost and an orchestrator like Emily, and then we figure out the directions that we go in because it takes all of it all.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Diana. And that reminds me of something that Noah had said earlier, just like the essential role of the organizations on the ground that are pulling together these, coordinating and pulling together collaboration. That takes investment. You have to invest in those people to be able to serve in that role. So to the funders that are in the room, just like really want to emphasize that point of it takes people power and time and resources to be able to do that function within these kinds of collaborations. Justin, anything you want to add? And then we're going to close out with Murray.
Yeah, well, I definitely echoing what you mentioned, Diana, and I think, that foundational partner, it would help for them to have some funding associated with their work and someone to actually really uh, be able to fund the initial aspects of the movement. That's very critical. And just as Rockefeller has stepped in, I'm sure in different regions and states around the world, around the nation, there are willing funders that could align themselves with these priorities. For us, that's critical. In even as we identify areas where we want to expand our Farms Fund program. In addition to that, of course, a productive, a local food economy that already exists, communities that are looking to patronize or get healthy food. There's a local market scene that is
Mhm.
productive. There are farmers that are really needing the resource in land access. These things are critical, and there's need all across the nation that mirrors our metropolitan areas that I think really lends to the opportunity to duplicate this work. And
I'm saying? I don't
we're
know.
we're
Also,
we're we're definitely in new ground here, but this isn't something that one organization or one coalition can do. We need so many different players at the table here to advocate for the institutional funding, the policy for conservation funding, farmland conservation at a state level, at a federal level. There's so much work in so many different aspects of this local food system that deserve a coalition, I'd say.
Yeah, thank y'all. Well, Murray, we're going to give you the last word on this panel part of our webinar today. So I'm curious to hear, from your perspective, what made this opportunity different from the other market or grant opportunities that you've been involved with? You named a USDA project you had been involved with, and what actually changed on the ground for your farm as a result of your participation in the Georgia ACRE Collective?
Well, I think the vision that the ACRE Collective has and the role that Emily played in putting all this together, that's is fundamental. That's so necessary for us as farmers, for somebody to have the kind of vision that you all have to help us. Um, Land and equipment is so expensive. Land now costs 10 times what it cost when we started in 2011. And to provide uh, land, we farm 100 and about 180 acres. Our farm is small, but we rent about twice what we own, and land is a bottleneck. Um, and buying land is prohibitive for us right now. So, even Justin's and the conservation funds involvement is very helpful. And I think I just can't say enough for all the network of people whom Emily and conservation, the collective ACRE Collective grant have put together to help us. The funding is important, but all the help that we have obtained from various resources like Diana and Bill and others, but Diana especially, we're grateful for all their help. Thank you.
Right on. Well, thank you each so much for sharing so generously your experience and your knowledge and wisdom that was gleaned through this collaboration. And I'm excited to see how y'all continue to work together moving forward from here. We're going to open it up for some questions from the audience and just some discussion. So yeah, let's all give some love to these speakers for their time and thoughtfulness and sharing all this with us. And I'm curious, Melanie, if I could ask you, is there anything that was kind of coming up in the chat? Any questions that we could kick off with? We have about 10 or so minutes for Q&A and discussion here.
Yes, there's a lot of momentum in the chat, and particularly around one question, which has been uplifted twice. So I'm going to start there. And I did stack some questions because they had kind of similarities or were related. So right now, I think one of the biggest questions that's coming out of this conversation is wanting to hear a little bit more about the institutional buyers that resulted in contracts. And so I'm specifically wanting to know a little bit more about how easy it was to set up a meeting and with um, who, uh, who met with the institutions from your team, how tactical were the conversations, um, you know, uh, versus higher level values forward. And then how did you go from that sounds good to actually seeing institutions buy local?
Nice.
Is a big
Thank you.
question.
Yeah, Emily, that's probably a question for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, and please give me a ping if I don't address all of the points. So, in case it wasn't clear, and I realize maybe we didn't explicitly say this at the beginning of the call, but the Common Market is a nonprofit regional food distributor. So we have a warehouse located in East Point, Atlanta, um, where we have a freezer and a cooler, and that's where all of our trucks come and go, pick up products, deliver it directly to institutions throughout the Southeast. So we are the aggregator in this project, and the entire all of the food that was moved to institutions for this work was under the umbrella of the Common Markets Distribution Network. And so the buyer producer meetings that I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint were a really key way to develop relationships with new institutions. So at a lot of these, I'm thinking of, for instance, one that we hosted, I believe, 2 summers ago with Aramark higher education accounts throughout the Southeast. And so that meeting included some existing accounts, but then we had potentially new accounts join that meeting as well. And so it was often at those meetings, the district manager and the account manager for those accounts who were present, as well as sometimes the chefs, the head chefs there. And there was a lot of validation that was created by hearing from your peers throughout the Southeast around what's happening at one institution and really seeing what's possible at your own institution. And so I think that was one of the key pieces around developing new sales relationships with new customers. Murray mentioned Bill Green, who's the former executive director of the Common Market Southeast. And Bill, before he left for a different role, really drilled into my head that if he has a meeting with a potential new customer and the first thing they ask is, what's the price? He can pretty much guarantee that that's not going to be a longstanding customer. Like that's not a, that question isn't initiating a strong partnership. And so Bill really would start these conversations around, you know, getting at what are the values that your institution has, and then having a conversation around, okay, well, how can your food procurement help you align with these values? And the ACRE Collective at the very beginning, within the first a couple months of launching, we actually had a series of conversations through Alliance for a Healthier Generation with institutions throughout Atlanta to really get at what are some values that institutions are prioritizing. And so it could be kind of helping to set the stage for having these conversations around how food procurement can align with values. Did I miss anything, Melanie?
No, that's perfect. And actually, it might feed into the next question. And so the next question that had a lot of momentum around it, which was like, how did you move from piloting local purchasing to predictable regular purchasing? What role do aggregators play, if any? And then a related question is, you said that you had a champion, a leader, which was key. How have you seen buyer institutionalize these forward contracts, values, or relationships so that these benefits don't disappear?
Okay, same note as before. Let me know if I missed anything. Um, so for this work, like aggregator was key. There are some farms in the Farms Fund that are doing direct wholesale distribution direct to institutions. But for the most part, most of the institutions that we engage with express a desire to work with a distributor. That the logistics of, working with a long list of local producers, and especially ensuring the food safety qualifications that they want to see as part of their requirements for keeping their eaters healthy, is just too complicated. And so I think distributors and aggregators like the Common Market play a really key role, both in terms of hopefully making Murray's job easier, that he doesn't have to do deliveries and develop relationships with 40 institutions throughout the Southeast, but also making those institutions' jobs with their desire for local sourcing easier by working with one distributor as opposed to a long list of local producers. Um, I forget the other pieces of your question.
No, that's perfect. I think, I think it was mostly just about like how do you have a champion and leader? Could you mention that was a key? So how have you seen buyer institutionalize these forward contracts and relationships so that the benefits don't disappear?
Yeah. And now I'm remembering like some of the questions around like how do you pilot this versus moving on
Yes.
to something more sustained. So from the common markets perspective, we don't have a requirement that our accounts have standing orders or forward commitments. Like we have delivery minimum requirements based on your location. And so if someone's interested, an institution's interested in trying something, once or twice, and then they decide that's not a good fit, that's totally fine. Our goal is to have these long-standing commitments that are renewed season after season. But we're more than happy to start small and then grow. I think that's a better idea than being overly ambitious and then letting everyone down, the farmers, your eaters, and the common market as a distributor. So again, I think it like leans on these like relationships and the fact that relationship building takes time and helping to connect the institutions with the producers and that are actually growing that food. So some of, again, going back to the buyer producer meetings, some of these meetings we've held on farms. We've also helped coordinate farm tours for food service management companies and individual institutions so they can hear directly from the farmers that are benefiting from this, so that it's not this abstract idea, and they can actually kind of, see who they're benefiting by purchasing this food, and also understanding
Mm.
just the complexity of growing food. And in some of these meetings, some kind of issues have arose around like delivery days and ordering schedules and like, case counts and things like that. And it's an opportunity for the institution and the grower to have some conversations where they can, develop empathy and create this, shared language and common ground that isn't created just via, filling out an online ordering system. So once again, I think it comes back to relationships.
Do we
I
have
don't, I
time
don't,
for
oh,
one
go
more?
ahead, Mel.
Oh, sorry. Do we have time for one more? And
Yeah.
you may have touched on this already. I was trying to follow the chat here. So, you did talk a little bit about pain points. And one of the questions that there was some momentum around was like, what are the greatest barriers to institutional buying, and the forward contract, and how are they overcome? And a related question is, um, for the forward purchasing of the contract, is it paid in full model or a percentage upfront? And what does the remainder distribution look like throughout the season?
So the forward commitment program, not all of the producers that are participating in the forward commitment program are paid in advance. So we have the Farmer Loan Fund, which is tied sometimes to the forward commitment program, but the Farmer Loan Fund is the program where farmers are paid in advance. Oftentimes it's like 50% of their crop plan for the season. And then that's reimbursed once they do the deliveries. But just to be clear, all of the producers that participate in the forward commitment program aren't participating in the farmer loan program. And then in terms of barriers, oh, I mean, a lot of folks will raise cost as the primary barrier. I think once you dig into this and have detailed conversations with institutions, oftentimes it emerges that there is more flexibility with budgets, than you previously thought, especially for higher education and private institutions. Maybe not as much in the K through 12 public school space, depending on kind of what incentive type programs are available. In your region. But I've been talking a lot, so I would love to hear, if Diana or Justin or Murray have anything to share in terms of the barriers that they see in terms of institutional procurement and ways to overcome it.
Emily, you honestly have been killing it with these answers. And I really love the quote that you mentioned from Bill, as he's coming into these arrangements. If price is, foundational questions, then it's probably not going to be a sustainable relationship. Oftentimes, what you'll see is locally produced food has a higher price point, for good reason, because a lot of times, these larger acreage farms or more commercial farms, have subsidies associated with their production, and we local farms just don't get that subsidy trickle down. So the values alignment is critical. It cannot be understated, just for these distributors to really, maybe even sacrifice a bit of their overhead, or just that profit margin, just so they can support the local food ecosystem and provide their eaters with healthy, fresh, affordable food.
I'll add into on the technical assistance side. I think it's really important for the farmers to be prepared, because being a great farmer and then also being small to mid-size, sometimes they don't come equipped with exactly what is expected of them from the institutional buyer side of things. So we want to set them up for complete success rather than already having marks against them when they walk in and go, you didn't have a price list. I don't know your sell sheet. I'm not sure when your product's going to be available. What kind of volume can you do? We should never go in being ashamed to say this is what we grow and this is what we can meet, but we should never overpromise what we're trying to achieve. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to support the education on both sides of that.
Mm. Wow, y'all, I just looked at the clock and I realized we're 2 minutes to close here. So 90 minutes went by really quickly. And I know we wanted to quickly just emphasize a couple of the resources that are available coming out of this project. So, Caitlin, maybe if you could bring up those last two slides really quickly. And Emily, do you want to tell us about what's available here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we put together a handful of case studies as well as a really beautiful video series about different aspects of the ACRE Collective's work. It's easily Googleable, but we can also we'll share the link out to both of these. So I know some of y'all have asked for resources and examples to share with members of your community. The videos are all short, 3 to 4 minutes sort of videos. Would encourage you to watch them and share them. And then the case studies are deeper dives into different aspects of this work. And love that it's being used in Australia. That's amazing. And then next slide. We'll also just give a shout out to the values-based procurement legal toolkit, which is coming soon. I think for folks that are interested in kind of the nitty-gritty of contract templates and RFPs and how to legally include values-based procurement language into this, this is going to be a really wonderful tool with the intention of kind of meeting you where you are so that institutions who are at different stages of values-based procurement can use this as a helpful resource. Oh, thank you, Dory, for putting those links in the chat. And yeah, that's it on my end.
Amazing. Well, something that occurs to me in terms of how this shared experience is carried on through time and is institutionalized in a way is how y'all have gone about sharing the story of your experience, like really being generous with the lessons learned, bringing people into that shared experience through this webinar and through all the storytelling that y'all have done. It's been remarkable to learn from all of you today, and just thank you to each of our speakers and to the Common Market and Sustainable Ag and Food Systems funders for joining together to bring this webinar today. There's been a lot of love in the chat. For everyone who's here and for the listeners and to the recording here, we'll share out the resources that were linked here in the chat, as well as that were mentioned there at the end of the webinar. And thank you, all the participants, for making time to come and learn together, to bring back these insights and learnings back to our own communities and to keep it moving forward. So keep your eyes on the prize, y'all. We are doing really important work. Food is fundamental in our communities. And so each and every one of us that have our hands in this work together, we are building a more just and equitable future. Don't you forget that. And with that, we'll close out. Thank you all. Hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.